So, how do you stop yourself from blaming you for the mistakes and fuck ups that you've made after you have separated, divorced, or broken up with your ex-partner? Well, in this video, I will be talking to you about one of the biggest reasons as to why we tend to blame ourselves for things that are out of our control. And then I will be talking to you about how you can actually stop this pattern from occurring and what you can do so that you become more aware of it and you can shift that pattern once and for all. So, one of the reasons why we tend to blame ourselves is because at the core foundational level unconsciously, part of us feels undeserving, unworthy, unimportant, or not good enough. Because truth of the matter is you intellectually and logically know that it takes two to tango, right? So it's not just you really that allowed for the relationship to end. You are part of the equation, and you can take responsibility for that, but taking responsibility is different from blaming, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when we blame ourselves, one of the reasons why we do this is because if deep down we don't feel worthy enough to either be in the relationship or not good enough to deserve a better, happier life, then as a response to that deeply rooted wound, then we try to rationalize and we blame ourselves so that we can perceive that we have control over the situation, which kind of gets us stuck in that loop, right? And, we really, really need to break this loop, because the more we blame ourselves, the more we allow ourselves to get stuck and not move forward. Because blaming if you blame yourself, it just makes you feel like shit, first of all, right? And when you blame yourself, you don't take responsibility for the things that you can do moving forward, right? Blaming is something that you do to yourself with regards to the things that have happened in the past. And truth of the matter is, the past already happened, right? So if you want to move on, you let go of the things that had already happened instead of going back to it and blaming it. That's also one of the reasons as to why we blame ourselves, because truly deep down, even though we want to move on, we really don't want to, right? Because if we really did want to, we would take responsibility and move forward. So what is that about for you? Why do you not want to let go of the past, right? And so being able to question yourself, this is very important. And, is it a completely bad thing to blame yourself? Let's try not to label things as good or bad, right? Start moving forward to just see things objectively as they are. You have blamed yourself, and now you can start now, right now, take responsibility for your actions, whether it was blaming the past, and then you can choose to move forward instead. Choose to take responsibility. If it's regarding a long-term relationship, then it takes two to tango, right? Like, you can look at that relationship, take responsibility for the mistakes that you've made, and learn from it instead of blame it. Because you can look at a situation, maybe you picked fights, right? Maybe you were someone who picked fights a lot. Instead of blaming yourself and saying, oh my God, the relationship ended because I started fights too much, which has some validity in it. But at the same time, how can you take responsibility for that and say, okay, so this is the pattern that I saw. I picked fights a lot. What is that about? Why did I want to fight that person? Is it because truly deep down I didn't feel that I was worthy to be in that relationship? Those types of questions are going to give you more clarity so that you can actually see what your pattern is and then start taking responsibility for it. Because then when you do that, you're able to accept it, right? When you're able to look at the same scenario, picking fights, and then you realize that maybe deep down you just felt very anxious in the relationship, and then maybe you inherently knew because your gut was telling you that the relationship was going to head nowhere, so as a defense mechanism you just picked a fight so that it actually ended, because deep down at the foundational level you knew that this person wasn't right for you anymore. And when you can gain that clarity, isn't that freeing? Isn't that liberating? Doesn't that just give you some peace of mind so you can let go of that clarity? When you're able to gain that clarity for yourself by looking at yourself straight in the mirror and facing the actual thing instead of blaming. Blaming is just taking responsibility, whether it, like, even if it's for blaming yourself, it's just taking the responsibility off you. But when you're actually able to look at the things and explore it and look at yourself in the mirror, this is how you stop doing it, because then you'll gain the clarity and say, okay, well, that made sense. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just not going to repeat that shit anymore, right? This is how you repattern your old patterns. It's by looking at them, knowing what they are, because when you can see them, although it might be very distressing and unpleasant and painful at that moment, that release is really going to help you, right? It's going to help you to move forward. And then when you have that acceptance, when you have that clarity, then you can start moving forward. And what that does is that it just helps that self-blame to dissolve, right? Because you have that clarity. You are no longer attaching the responsibility elsewhere. You're saying, here I am, I'm a powerful individual, I have messed things up, yes, but I'm not blaming myself for it, because what I did back then was all I knew, right? It was what I knew. And looking back now, I can see why I did what I did. When you can come from that place, that self-blame is going to stop, right? That self-blame will no longer be there. And when you catch yourself blaming yourself, you can redirect yourself and choose to think differently about the situation. And so this is exactly what I help my clients with, right? Because if they're not able to look at themselves in the mirror, if they're not able to take responsibility, then they won't be able to move on. They might think that they're able to, because time has passed, but truth of the matter is, if you don't take responsibility for the mistakes and the good things that you made, even take responsibility for the needs that weren't met in the relationship. If we don't take responsibility for that, if my clients don't take responsibility for that, then they just keep blaming themselves. And my clients are business owners. So if they blame themselves, it really affects their sales, because when you beat yourself up, when you have a low level of self-worth or feeling not good enough, then that affects their sales, that affects their ability to put themselves out there, and that really affects the relationships they have with their clients as well, because then they'll be blaming themselves for things that they can't control, like how much their clients how much their clients take action, right? So super, super important for you to really take responsibility, look at yourself in the mirror, and objectively look at why you did what you did, because it is through this exercise where you actually gain your power back, when you have that clarity to choose a different path for yourself, to choose better ways to live, to choose to write your own new chapter, which also gets exciting. So if you have any questions, make sure you comment below, or message me if you are interested in healing from a breakup, or after a separation, if you are a business owner. But otherwise, I will see you soon.